Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to Backstage Bimbo TV. My name is Allison Rouse, your most notorious groupie and author of We've Got Tonight, The Life and Times of Notorious Groupie, me. For those of you who don't know me, for those of you who have been around and hanging out, and all my new subscribers, thank you guys. I love you so much. It's great to see you guys twice a week when I do my videos. Thanks so much for being part of this and just being really awesome. So today on our midweek Rocky Talkie, we're going to go to my Vegas years with Cousin Amy. And it's when we very first hung out. This was probably our second or third time really kind of going out with each other. If you've watched the Escaping the Yakuza video, which I'll put a link down in the description for those of you guys who have not seen it, this is a night with George, the guy who sent us to the Yakuza. This is when we had first met him, and this was also the first anniversary of the Motown Cafe in Las Vegas, Nevada. And that night, there was Paula Abdul and her second husband. There was the Boyz II Men, and there was also a few of the Jacksons hanging around. So we're going to talk about that night, and I'm just grabbing a Bailey's right now because it's a midweek Rocky Talkie, and let's just grab what we want, kick back, have a drink. So grab your deliciousness, kick up your feet, and let's have a Rocky Talkie, shall we? Cheers, big ears. Okay, so this is 1995. It was, God, probably before we left for Japan in October. So this was probably a few weeks before. So a few weeks before we went to Japan. And it was the 1 year anniversary. So George calls us up and he's like, hey, you know, I've got us into the 1 year anniversary party. Boyz II Men was debuting their fashion line there. Paula Abdul and her husband, who actually announced their divorce 2 weeks after this, were emceeing the fashion show. She wasn't really, this is pre-American Idol. She was in a dip in her career. Like, nobody gave a shit about Paula Abdul at this point. And also, there was Joseph Jackson, Michael Jackson's father, Tito, and Jermaine Jackson at this party. So we get all dolled up. I put on this suede jacket I have. This is the pre-Almost Famous years with this. It's black with this fur collar. This little black dress. Cousin Amy gets dressed up kind of the same. Well, not the same. She gets in her outfit. We look all cute, right? So we meet up with George, and we head over to the, I believe it's in the MGM Grand, I think is where the Motown was. I don't believe it's there anymore. And we meet up with George. So we get taken into upstairs where the VIP area is immediately when we get to, I don't know who George knew. This is before we knew George was like the skeezy motherfucker that he turned out to be. We had done a couple photo shoots with him. And so far seemed trustworthy, as guys do when they have women that they want something from, right? So anyway, we go and we get seated in this private booth area upstairs. It's open to the bottom so we can watch the fashion show. And the first thing that happens is the guys from Boyz II Men. Cousin Amy can't even get into the booth without one of the guys from Boyz II Men coming up and like, hey girl, hey, what's going on? And they were all being, you know, sweet, or suave, cool-like, and coming up in their outfits and really cool, you know, the stuff that they had just designed. So they're all trying to slide into the booth, and one of them starts rubbing on Cousin Amy's shoulders. And Cousin Amy, she is really an awesome chick, but no, don't touch her unless she tells you you can touch her. She almost bit the guy's hand off. I swear to God, she was like, hey. So that kind of starts the night off, that they're all, well, let's get some champagne over here. And George is just looking at this whole situation like, oh yeah, these are girls that I could really use. And I should have seen this night, that his greedy towards us, like he was using us to get to every famous person that was there. Because there was a lot of famous people there. A lot of locals, Las Vegas celebrities, like Siegfried and Roy, Bernie, who was big time manager. You've seen him in the Ocean's 11, 12, 13 movies. Oscar Goodman, who played himself in the Casino movies. He was the mafia's lawyer and later mayor of Las Vegas. His wife was mayor last I knew. because he couldn't run anymore. But so kind of this like real big Las Vegas scene, like all these big names from the drag queen show at the Riviera, all these big names, and the Jacksons. So as we're sitting there, Cousin Amy and I at the table, and we get the champagne that, the Cristal that the boys send over, that the Boyz II Men guys send over. And they were really nice guys. We were talking to them for a while, and we're like, oh, that's cool to meet them. And they had to go get ready for their fashion show, which they were one of the first bands that really came out with their own fashion line. So it was being filmed. I'm not sure what show it was being filmed for. So as we're sitting there, we get the champagne, and we're just kind of talking to George, and he's talking about going to Japan this night. We're talking about Japan. So we're kind of mulling it over. We're just in the middle of our own conversation when I see Paula Abdul and her then husband. I think his name was Ben. It was the one after Emilio Estevez. So they come out and they're leaning up against the railing, and you can tell they're sitting there just talking shit. Like, they're wondering who me and George and Cousin Amy are. We're just people. When you live in Las Vegas, you know all the VIP hosts, you know all the people throwing the parties, you know the people that can get you in the door. So when you live in Las Vegas, it doesn't matter who you are. If you know the right people, you are at the best parties. And I always knew all the right people. So up against this railing is leaning Paula and her husband, and this bitch has no room to talk. You could tell she was talking shit about me and Cousin Amy. And kind of laughing, and she kind of even pointed at us when a couple other people came over to her, and they just kind of looked at her. I'm like, bitch, you got no room to talk. When she was on the Lakers, the big joke about Paula Abdul is when she did the splits, that half of the players' champion rings would fall out of her vajayjay. Yeah. So she had no room to talk, and plus she was sitting there living a lie, being all, I have the greatest husband, and I've got the greatest wife, and it's so great to be here, when 2 weeks later they filed for divorce. So I have never liked Paula Abdul since then. I didn't like her when I met her on the Club MTV tour with Was Not Was and Sweet Pea and all those guys. Didn't like her then. Especially didn't like her now, because, like I said, who the fuck is she to come out and start talking shit about us? Because that's exactly what she was doing. You knew she was doing this, right? So she goes down, and they start introducing the fashion show and doing all their fake Hollywood kiss-ass bullshit. When George is like, hey, Joseph Jackson's in the next room. Come on, let's go meet him. You could tell, like, he knew that the only way he was going to meet Joseph Jackson was because if he took Cousin Amy and I, the two pretty girls, in there. And I'm not saying that, I think I'm so pretty and I'm so stuck up. I am what I am. I'm my own thing. And he was using, and Cousin Amy's gorgeous. She's like Jennifer Aniston, beautiful. So he knew he could use the two pretty girls to get to Joseph Jackson. So we go to Joseph Jackson. And he's standing there talking to a couple other people. I'm thinking his PR people or managers or something. Bernie's up there, the manager for half the really big acts in Las Vegas. Oscar, we kind of were talking to them when George takes us over to introduce us to Joseph Jackson. I'm going to hold my drink because Joseph, like, this whole side of his body seems stroked out. Like he had a stroke. And I can't. And I'm not saying this to make fun or anything. I'm saying this because it just added to his creepiness. Like, even going up to him, you could feel his energy. And I was just thinking in my head, God, wasn't even introduced to him yet. And I just didn't like him. So we go up and we get introduced as like, hey, ladies. And if anybody knows what this means, when a guy shakes your hand and does this, yeah. And Joseph Jackson's hand, when he shook my hand, and he's just holding on to his drink, and he's just sitting there, and he just shakes my hand, and he's got this little twitchy middle finger going up against the palm of my, and I'm like, no, ugh, like, it just creeped me out, like, it made my skin crawl when he did that, and I was just like, oh, so nice to meet you. And Cousin Amy kind of saw what was going on, and she didn't even shake his hand. She just put a hand on the shoulders, like, really good to meet you. And we kind of talked to him for a minute. He's like, well, what are you pretty ladies doing? And he's like trying to get us to come home with him. Hell no. Number one, he's like, If his hand is twitchy, what's going on with that? And number two, no, he's Joseph Jackson. He's just a creepy old man. Nothing sexy about that. And I like my men dirty, old, and English. But this was creepy. Not even I would cross into that territory. And walking away from Joseph Jackson, I kind of started to understand why Michael Jackson and Janet Jackson kind of turned out the way they did and separated themselves from the family. Growing up in a house with that man, Jesus Christ, I'm surprised any of them have any sanity. But, so we get done talking to him, and we go downstairs, because, you know, the Boyz II Men guys, and they're like, hey, come down while we're doing a fashion show. So we go down there, and when you walk into the Motown Cafe, there's this bronze statue of the Jackson 5. And we're going through the lobby to go into the main area where the runway is. So all of a sudden, George is dragging Amy and I off again. He's like, hey, these two guys want to meet you. And it turns out it's Tito and Tito and Jermaine Jackson. And they're standing in front of, I mean, this was just so weirdly vain, because I've known a lot of rock stars at this point, and I'm not impressed by your rock star status. I'm impressed by your attitude and your heart and your soul. And these guys were all ego. Like Jermaine and Tito both had so much eyeliner tattooed on, like lip liner, everything. I mean, they had more tattooed makeup on than RuPaul could put on with every MAC product ever in the history of MAC, which MAC was made for drag queens. So ladies who wear it, switch out. Too heavy. But then Jermaine, like Tito was definitely instantly clicking onto Amy. And Tito, like, was all like, oh, hey, kind of trying to grab her both of her arms. And Cousin Amy's kind of trying to, like, slowly back up out of her coat, like, take the coat off so she doesn't get touched by him anymore. And Jermaine is sitting there, like, kind of holding on to my hand with both hands and kind of doing this, like, rubbing up and down my arm. And I mean, because there was nothing sexy about it. It's just with all that makeup tattooed on, with the ego, with everything coming at me in this big, in front of the Jackson 5 thingy. And they might have been Jackson 5 back then, but as far as I was concerned, even now and back then, in this moment in time, they were all skating off Michael and Janet. That's what they were doing. And you could tell that they thought they were so privileged and such, you know, royalty. And he's like, yeah, you should really come hang out. There's going to be this party. And Tito's saying, I mean, it was like in stereo. They're saying the exact same thing. Tito and Jermaine, two different girls right next to each other. And it was just such a crazy, weird, surreal moment to that be going on in front of. And when I left them, I really understood why Michael was the way he was with the dad and the older brothers. I'm thinking the mom was probably the only sane person in that house, and that poor woman. Any woman that grew up in that house, I felt so bad for at that moment in time, seriously. Because, like I said, it was just weird. And finally, I had to even, like, kind of yank my hand away from Jermaine. And Tito kind of had to, like, Cousin Amy, Tito had her around the waist. So she's kind of, like, rolling slowly out of his arms and his grasp. And we finally get away from him, and we find George, because I don't know where George had wandered off to all this time. And we're like, yeah, we just want to go. We just want to go. And the Paula Abdul and her husband, as we were kind of walking towards, you know, where Boyz II Men were, because they were actually the coolest guys of the night. They weren't, like, creepy or anything. They were just normal 20-something, 30-something-year-old musicians, like, hey, ladies. That was the most normal part of the night. And even they were, like, being over dramatic about it. It was crazy, because the rap groupie world and the rock groupie world are very, very different. And one day I'll do a vlog on that, because I've hung out with other rap stars, you know, like Ice-T and his band, E40, Luda, Snoop, you know, just Be Real and stuff. So I know a lot of the rappers, and it really is such a different world. So they kind of approached us very different in a way that Cousin Amy and I just weren't used to. So we just found George. We're like, yeah, we want to go. We just want to go. And he was like, no, you got to stay. I want to do this, and you girls, and this, and you promised. And we should have known then. that he was going to throw us to the wolves in Japan, because he was trying to use us, and I don't know what he'd been telling the guys before we met them, but something tells me it was pretty seedy. And this was kind of my first introduction into the who not to know and what not to get into in Las Vegas. And yeah, really taught me a lot that night, and going to Japan from this one person. I mean, that was my first 2 months in Las Vegas living there. It was crazy. So, and that was my night meeting the Jackson family and Boyz II Men, and being at and it was pretty, it was a decently fun night. Like I said, Boyz II Men guys, we talked to them for a little while before we left. They were really super nice guys, but just kind of ruined the whole moment with Joseph Jackson. I still don't get what that, I mean, who does that that's out of junior high? I mean, that was something we all used to giggle at when we were hanging out with boys in the movies. Oh, pre-sex, virgin days, whatever. But still to this day, creeps me out, because half of his body is just hanging there. And like I said, I understand why Michael Jackson turned out the way he did, as fucked up as he did. I love Michael Jackson, but had some issues from growing up, and now I see why. So there you guys go. That's one of my first nights out in Las Vegas. It was after my first concert in Las Vegas, which is the Ramones, and we'll vlog about that later. And again, thank you guys so much for all the love and support you're giving me, the awesome comments. It's really great to meet everybody on this journey. Thank you so much, and I appreciate all the love and support. But don't forget, I thank you guys, everybody who's sharing my stuff. I've seen a couple Metallica fans. Metallica fans have always scared me the worst, but you guys have really turned out to be amazing and awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing all my stuff. Don't forget, if you're the 60% who's just haunting my channel, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the share. You don't have to hit them all at once. You can share and get me out there. Spread me like I spread my legs in the 80s, like I always say. And I want to wish everybody a happy 2022. May all your dreams come true. May you have no fear to go after your dreams. And may we all do unto others we would have done to ourselves. Let's make it a better world. All right? All right. Thank you again, everybody. Don't forget, hit the subscribe, hit the like, hit my bells, and we will see you next week for another Rocky Talkie. Cheers, big ears.